It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, folks, today we're going to jump on the gigantic Sharp Interactive board. I want to share some thoughts regarding Visual Edge IT. They got a new CEO. He started July 7th. He's been in the job for 52 days, and I'm asking what's new besides him. You know, I'm seeing some publications out there, and it really appears to me that the chairman of the board, who's the old CEO, I mean, that's what they said, right? When the new CEO took over, the old CEO moved to the chairman of the board. And it really looks like the old CEO, who's now the chairman of the board, is driving the bus still, and that's horrifying to me. I'm going to share some thoughts on that. But as I was preparing today's episode, I saw this publication in the BDC Credit Reporter. It has nothing to do with Visual Edge IT. It has to do with another IT services company. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to this headline. New Era Technology second quarter 2025 update and recent restructuring. A global managed technology service provider has been in default on its debt for the last 2 quarters, including the same term debt owed by 6 different BDCs. However, a realization event has just occurred if we only knew what was involved. So they're going to dig deeper into this, but New Era Technology? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, is there another BDC-funded managed services business having financial performance issues? According to the BDC creditor, there is, and there's a whole big long article about it. I'm not going to get into that in today's episode, but I'll definitely be following up on this story. Very interesting to me. You know, in that story, they mentioned Centennial Capital Partners as being an investor in New Era Technology, and I went to Centennial Capital Partners website. Sure enough, they were an investor in New Era Technology. They did that deal with them back in 2019, but it says the status is exited. Doesn't say anything about how they exited, but that's interesting to me. We all know that Centennial Capital Partners is the money behind UBO. And, you know, the good thing is, you know, UBO, they're just a document management print services company, you know. But folks, you know, I've been saying this for a while. All these mega dealers that are backed by private equity, you know, well, if they're not a BDC lender, a publicly traded investment firm, we have no idea how they're doing with their investors. I mean, we don't know the situation between UBO and Centennial. You know, we don't know the situation between Marco and Norwest. We don't know any of that stuff. And I always said, you know, what if these folks had to share their financials every single quarter? You know, what would the industry learn? And the benefit we all had as an industry is we were able to look and see what was going on at Visual Edge regarding their investor, Ares Capital. You know, and in that third quarter of 2023, when Ares Capital wrote off that senior subordinate loan that sat on accrual for over a year, lost $48 million, and they took a preferred position on the balance, that was an alarm bell that we all should have been paying attention to in our industry. And of course, the industry, me and the analysts, didn't want to discuss it. But these are important things. And folks, at the end of the day, these investment houses, they are really starting to think about where to put their money. They're really starting to think about things they need to divest of. There's so many more things that are more exciting to invest in than print roll-ups, right? Come on, seriously. So I believe we're going to see some realizations coming soon for a lot of our friends in the industry. But man, when you look at this New Era, it's a big company. Man, they got 4,500 employees, 80 offices worldwide, and 20,000 customers. They're doing a lot of the IT stuff IT services companies do. What's going on here? What's going wrong? Stay tuned for more on that. But folks, I mean, think about this whole concept of huge investments in IT. I think about CompuCon, getting together with Office Depot. You know, Office Depot, we're going to be IT service providers. They put $1 billion in that thing, and then they end up dumping it for $305 million just a few short years later. There's also been another big company that was written about in the BDC Credit Reporter, a company called Visual Edge IT. They wrote about them 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And no one in our industries, media or analysts, ever covered any of those stories, except for yours truly. And at the end of the day, we have an opportunity to learn. We have an opportunity to question. We shouldn't be pushing stuff under the rug when it's right in front of our face. It's craziness. So I want to ask the new CEO a couple of questions, kind of define today's episode. Will Visual Edge IT continue to lead with print? Does the new CEO of Visual Edge IT believe that print services will lead to managed IT and security services? Will the new CEO help digest to the employees what Google says about Visual Edge IT? I put some stuff in the Google machine, and the stuff that came out, the employees are doing the same thing, I assure you. Customers are doing the same thing. And I think the new CEO needs to probably address this stuff, and hopefully he is. Will the new CEO clarify the conversations of the previous CEO who is now the company's chairman of the board. I went back to that crazy interview that the old CEO, who supposedly now is the chairman, did with a guy with a hat. And there's some stuff in there that really made me really sick. And I want to be honest with everybody, if you don't already know this, but I have literally zero respect for the old CEO of Visual Edge IT. I just believe the guy was completely disingenuous. And I'm just going to tell you that right up front. So if anybody thinks I'm being biased against him, I just don't have any respect for him. And I think he had numerous opportunities to share with our industry what was really going on at Visual Edge IT instead of gaslighting every chance he had, right? Well, the new CEO changed the website. I went to the website of Visual Edge IT. There's some stuff on there that's kind of interesting. I want to share my thoughts on that. And how many more new C-suite leaders will be onboarded? He's starting to look at his team. Is he going to onboard any more? And how many new leaders will be added at the field level? And so, folks, I want to start out with some of the media I'm seeing. We're talking about stuff we were talking about when the old CEO was there. Let's have some events. Let's bring in some football players. I'm just thinking, maybe these events should have been canceled and really defined how we're going to go into the marketplace and deliver profitably exceptional services. How are we going to reinvent the company? Those are things that should have taken priority. And I just want to say this up front. It doesn't really, the way they go into the marketplace is one thing. But when you take over a company that's obviously had major financial stress, this isn't like just taking over. Okay, everything's going great with the last guy. I'm just kind of taking over. Let's keep doing what we were doing. I'm just younger. I'll be able to last longer, whatever the reason was. Okay, that's insanity. This guy's taken over a company that's been into financial stress for quite a while. There's a lot of things that have to change. The whole world knows it, but yet it doesn't seem like it's being addressed. And when you see the marketing kind of similar to what we've already seen, it's a little bit scary. I want to bring up the fact, does he think that a print company is going to just go into being an IT services company? And I want to remind him of the videos that I've done regarding Dex Imaging, because we can go out there and watch these things. But Dex Imaging announced that they were going to get into IT services. They started a company called Dex Tech. The gentleman that they brought in to run Dex Tech, I believe the new CEO of Visual Edge IT probably knows, because they were both involved with the same company at one time in their life. And at the end of the day, call the guy up. Because, when Dex Imaging first got into IT services, I did an episode and I told you all why they were doing it. Because, Dex was always against it, right? Very publicly, always against getting into IT. And all of a sudden they're getting into it. And I said the reason they're getting into it is because they want to get more of a multiple on their EBITDA. They want to make the company more valuable. And I was very cautionary. And I wished them luck. And then, a couple weeks later, the CEO they put in charge to run Dex Tech does this interview, and he did it in a couple different places. And I'm reading this thing, and I'm just horrified by it. I did another episode. Holy crap, okay, I take it back. I don't think they're going to make it. I actually told you that. I think this is crazy. And, of course, that gentleman's no longer there. But I think that the new CEO of Visual Edge IT should really reach out to his friend, if they know each other, and talk about this. And, I don't know what Dex Tech is doing today. You don't hear a lot of fanfare about it. You don't see any more interviews about it, right? And this is part of the problem. Our industry, the media, they love to get these folks all excited. Hey, let's talk about whatever you're doing right now. Let's go over the big old story. And then when things change drastically to that story, they don't bother to share any other details. It's like they're all a bunch of scared. It's just amazing how wimpified our industry is. It really is amazing to me. They think sharing the truth with people, talking about realities with people is a terrible thing. Don't do that. How are we going to be respectful if we talk about things that are going bad? Well, that's how you'd be respectful, in my opinion. You're telling the damn truth, right? Jeez, I tell you what, our industry's got some nuttiness to it. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I go on the Google machine, and I think the CEO needs to figure this out really quick, because I just typed in Visual Edge IT financial trouble. And I'm sure that employees that work there have typed the same thing in the Google machine, and I'm sure that the customers typed this into the Google machine. You know what Al Overview, that really smart person at Google, says? Listen to this. Yes, Visual Edge IT has experienced significant financial trouble with its business development company, BDC lender Ares Capital, taking tens of millions in loss and writing off debt, indicating the company's performance is poor and potentially heading towards bankruptcy. The company's debt went into non-accrual, meaning interest was not being paid and significant loan was extended but remains valued at zero. Well, a new CEO was appointed in July of 2025 to potentially find an exit strategy. The company's overall deliverable isn't performing financially, and a bankruptcy is a possibility. I mean, this is what Google's saying. Google's talking about high level of concern. The situation has been described as a high wire life due to the company's debt-driven growth and the termination of key leadership figures. And so, look, at the end of the day, Google is and Google is, right? But still, I think you should be addressing some of this stuff. And folks, the reality of it is, you know, we all know that Visual Edge IT has definitely been financially stressed. What's the plan? And I really believe the plan is what Google says it is. And what Google says it is, new leadership. In July 2025, Visual Edge IT appointed as a new CEO, which may be a move to explore different exit strategies for the company's investors. That's what I believe it's about. I believe they brought in a gentleman to kind of clean up a little bit, but not too much. Don't go crazy. We're going to have some kind of a event. And once we have the event, then it will be all hands on deck and we'll fix it. But until then, let's just kind of maintain. That's the only thing I could think of. Because otherwise, he should have came in guns blazing. I mean, this company obviously needed a lot of help, right? Come on. And so, folks, you know, the 10Qs and the 10Ks, they were all out there. You know, when you Google about Visual Edge, Ares Capital, and the Google machine talks about how Ares Capital wrote off $48 million. That's all out there. People can find all this stuff. But I think the new CEO needs to make sure the people that work at Visual Edge IT are fully in tune with these 10Qs and 10Ks and understands what's going on. And the good and the bad and the ugly. Otherwise, how do you improve? But again, if the goal is just kind of sit tight, there's going to be an event, and then all hell will break loose after the event. It kind of makes sense that you're not talking about any of this stuff. Because there's a lot to talk about, I assure you. And ladies and gentlemen, the other thing I wanted to Google was the company philosophy and values. Right from the Google machine. I mean, the company philosophy and values, trust and collaboration, growth and innovation, communication, strategic partnerships. I'm sure the new CEO is talking about this stuff. But I'm thinking, you know, I got some questions regarding some of this stuff, so I want to share them with you. Trust and collaboration. Well, what's happening with the trust regarding Phantom shares? Is there still trust in that? Has the new CEO addressed any of those trust issues, if there was any? Growth and innovation. Is the company growing? I mean, that's something to discuss. Is the company really growing? Or are we just saying we're growing, right? Can the company satisfy its debt obligations? Or will Ares Capital have to write off additional losses? How are you addressing that? You know, part of growth and innovation, you got to have the money to grow, right? You got to have the dollars to invest in innovation. You know, where's that going to come from? Those are good questions, and I'm sure your employees are probably asking them. It talks about communication, clear, respectful, frequent communication. Here's a question for you. Are employees banned from discussing the massive write-off of Ares Capital? Can they even bring that up? Like if somebody asked that in a town hall? You know, if somebody said, hey, I was watching the end of the day with Ray and he was showing the 10Q and 10K over there at Ares Capital. I mean, is it really true that Ares Capital wrote off a senior supported loan that has sat in non-accrual for over a year and they took a loss of $48 million, their largest loss that quarter? I mean, if somebody asked that question, would you address it? Would you allow that question to even be asked? I think that's a good question. Does Visual Edge IT believe that some lies are respectful? I mean, some folks really do believe this. It's okay to lie. I mean, sometimes you got to lie. Which, you know, that's not really respectful. I just think they should probably define that a little bit, right? And then we got strategic partnerships. Here's a question around partnerships. Does Visual Edge IT share their audited financials with end users who trust Visual Edge IT with managing their entire technology infrastructure? Because this is going to be a big issue for organizations. I believe it's coming soon. You know, we need to move upstream in their IT services. We need to go after those bigger accounts in the IT services deliverable. I've been saying that for a long time. And folks, I'm telling you right now, as you start to do this more and more, those end users are going to start asking for financials because they're taking a big risk. I mean, if you're taking care of their whole entire infrastructure, you know, you're billing these organizations $100,000, $200,000 a month. they got to make sure that you can maintain as a going concern. I mean, they really do. And they're going to start asking these questions. So I think that, that's a good question for Visual Edge IT. Could you share your financials publicly with your end users? I want to kind of talk about this really quick, but this was that interview with the old CEO and the guy with the hat, and I'm sure that y'all are tired of me bringing this up, but this is so important for our industry because this was such an obnoxious interview. And and I want to just highlight one thing, because I think that the new CEO can really, pay attention to the core values of the company and really nip this in the butt, and really start addressing some realities of some of the things this guy said. But I couldn't believe in this interview they were talking about the Hall of Fame, because they don't want to talk about the financial situation of the company. So the interviewer was more than happy to talk about this crazy Hall of Fame, relationship that Visual Edge IT has. And this guy, their old CEO, had the audacity to say this. When I heard this, I was so mad. I really was. He's talking about the Hall of Fame arrangement, talking about how it's branding, and then he says, this kind of thing if you can afford it. I was like, are you kidding me? This is arrogance at so many different levels. This guy that was the CEO of this company is talking about, hey, we're with the Football Hall of Fame, and it's great if you can afford to do it. Well, like a few months earlier than that, his BDC lender, Ares Capital, had their largest loss of all of their assets in the third quarter of 2023. And it was on Visual Edge IT, his company, when they wrote off the $48 million and took a preferred position on his company. And he's out there doing an interview talking about, the Hall of Fame is a fantastic thing to do if you can afford to do it. Total arrogance. I really believe the new CEO probably needs to call up the guy with the hat and say, hey, if you ever want me to come on that show, you better take that video off of there. That's what I'm thinking he ought to do. I went to the website of Visual Edge IT, and I would suggest that they take off printer support. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm not going to go into their whole website, but I just saw that. It was an alarm bell. You're a technology services company, just service would be fine. Service support would be fine. Printer support could be confusing to those customers that are paying you, tens of thousands of dollars a month for IT services. Oh, I don't have a printer with them. Well, I guess I got to call the number. Just something to think about. And I would also suggest this: get rid of the damn e-commerce site. That's not really an e-commerce site. What is wrong with our industry? I saw this on Visual Edge IT's website, and I know they got a relationship, I guess, with Keypoint Intelligence. One of their executives was the president of InfoTrends. Now he works over there at Visual Edge IT, so maybe he's the one that talked him into this nonsense. Who knows? Or maybe it was the last marketing guy that talked him into it, because he also came from InfoTrends. But what in the world? Why does our industry believe that we need to change e-commerce to e-quote? I mean, what are we thinking? Yeah, e-commerce, we could do it better. I mean, we're the Imaging Channel. I mean, we sell printer machines. We service and support them. Some of us do IT. But we know what we know about e-commerce. It sucks. We want to change it to e-quote. I mean, when Keypoint Intelligence came out with this crazy nonsense e-commerce platform, what did I do? I did a video, a couple of satires. I made fun of this thing because I thought it was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. What are they doing? And I even said the only reason they're doing it is because they don't know what to do with the BLI. They got all this information nobody's reading anymore. So, hey, let's make an encyclopedia website where people can go get a quote. I mean, please fix this. Visual Edge. You're either in e-commerce or you're not. And I want to wrap it up, so I went to the page where it talks about the executive leadership team. I did see they had a couple of changes here. So the new CEO brought in a chief of staff, and it looks like the chief of staff took the place of the operating officer in the rank and file. I mean, that's just the way the pictures are anyway. So I guess, that's the question. Is the chief operating officer third in line now? Because normally the chief operating officer is second in line. And now we got this chief of staff person, so I'm asking, maybe the chief operating officer is probably not going to be there much longer. Is he going to leave? And then, I did notice this vice president of marketing. It was the president of InfoTrends, and we all know InfoTrends sold to Keypoint. We all know that Keypoint is owned by private equity, so maybe he's there just to help him with the private equity thing, which makes more sense to me than being the marketing thing. Is he really the marketing vice president? What's going on there? Will the new CEO bring in his own CFO? But ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, I really believe the reason it's been so quiet at Visual Edge IT and you don't really see any big changes publicly is because I think it is in a holding pattern. And I would just caution that being in limbo can be really, really bad. especially a company that obviously has been apparently financially struggling. All those people have to do is go look at your lenders, 10Qs and 10Ks, and it defines financially trouble. And I want to end with this. It says, executive management team, pound, we are VET. I would just say this, I think all the team members should be included in the We Are VET. And quite honestly, I don't think you need to have your pictures on your website. You want to be a major IT services company. You don't need to have the pictures of who the president, none of that stuff. Nobody cares about any of that stuff, except maybe the people that put their pictures up there. But today, I got to tell you, the people that are, doing all this terrible stuff online with ransomware and hackers and all that stuff, they love to go to these websites and get information about all the leadership team. It saves them so much research. Oh, that's the CEO. Oh, that's the chief operating officer. Then they start looking into these folks. They start seeing where they're traveling, and the next thing you know, people are getting emails to wire money and all that stuff. A lot of that stuff is coming from websites, folks. They're just going to the websites. Like I said, do you really need to have your pictures on there? Folks, that's my thinking regarding Visual Edge IT. We are in the month of September in a couple of days. At the end of September, Arias Capital will publish their third quarter 10Q. We'll see how this thing's going. We'll see if there's been any major changes in the company since then. But I expect pretty soon there'll probably be a major change at the company. And remember this, status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck there.